Hi, everyone. Just going to wait for a few more attendees to straggle in here. So give us a few minutes. We'll be starting in a couple minutes. Thank you. All right, that should be enough time for most of the folks to come into the event. I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Finance, a People Business by Tamils in Finance. My name is Niro Ganesanathan, and I'm a director in the Interest Rate Derivatives Group at National Bank Financial. I've covered clients in the government, financial institution, infrastructure, and mortgage lending space for the past 8 years. I provide market advisory, structuring, and hedge execution support for clients using interest rate derivative solutions. I hold an MBA and an engineering degree from the University of Toronto. Tamils in Finance was a project that was started by some great individuals within our community. I joined the board of directors focusing on partnership within the group. This organization is a network of established and emerging Canadian Tamils in the investment, management, commercial and retail banking, sales and trading, risk management, private equity, venture capital, and other financial sectors. Our goal is to provide nearly 500 subscribers with a unique opportunity to mentor and support each other, purposely grow the professional network, advocate for more inclusion and accessibility in the financial sector, and in general, just to increase the collective influence of Tamils within finance. This event is very special to me, considering I do come from a relationship management area within finance. It's great hearing more about Tamils within this sector as the years go by. And I'm personally hoping that to shed some light within this industry so that, future generations within the Tamil community do look at this area within finance as a potential career path in the future. I do want to take this opportunity to invite or introduce our panelists this evening. The first panelist is Akilan Karuna, who is responsible for growing Munro's partners asset base and providing exceptional client service to their partners in North America. He is Munro's first international appointment and is based in Toronto. Prior to Munro, Akilan worked at CI Global Asset Management and oversaw the institutional marketing and business development support team. He worked directly with the head of institutional to build, drive, and execute on the overall sales and marketing strategy. Prior to joining CI, he held a variety of product roles at Invesco. He's completed a Master of Finance from Queen's University and holds the CFA. Akilan also holds a Bachelor of Commerce from Ryerson University. The next panelist I want to introduce here is Lakshmi Thurai, who works for FTSE Russell and LSEG business within the North American asset owner and consulting team. She is responsible for advancing the company's efforts across the asset owner market in Canada with the goal to drive AUM-based growth, foster new benchmark adoptions, and build long-term strategic relationships within the client segment. Previously, Lakshmi worked at RBC, where she was responsible for some of the largest institutional client partnerships within the asset manager space in Canada. Prior to this, she has additional experience having lived abroad in both Singapore and London and holding institutional sales and business development positions at Saxo Capital and Raymond James. Lakshmi has completed an undergraduate work as well as master's programs at Queen's University, McMaster University, and the Rotman School of Management at University of Toronto. A quick personal story here. I actually had to thank Lakshmi for my first summer position at Bay Street during my MBA. She connected me with a few individuals that she knew, which eventually led to a position on the trading floor at National Bank. So, that will definitely be a topic in terms of building a network. That's definitely a topic that we will explore within the conversation. At the end of the day, it is a people business, and having the ability to connect with people within the industry, not only for career development, but also for business development as well, is very important as well. So, that's one of the areas that we will cover within this conversation that we're having today. So, I did take some time here to introduce each of our panelists. But prior to continuing on with further questions, I do want to take the time to hear more of their story from their own words, how they got to their current positions, and anything they wanted to kind of start off the conversation with. Akilan, did you want to start off on your end?
Yeah, sure, absolutely, Niro. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks for that introduction there, and thanks for the opportunity to speak here with the entire Tamils in finance community. It's a great honor to be here. So similar to many of the folks that are dialed on the call here today, my parents are from Sri Lanka and moved here a few years before I was born. I was born and raised in Scarborough, and was fortunate enough to have my grandparents around me while I was growing up. And my grandmother, who was an English teacher back home, had always instilled in me from a very young age the importance of education, hard work, and integrity. And Niro, thanks for the introduction. I know you just mentioned some of the educational background. So did the undergrad in finance and also continued to pursue a master's and the CFA designation. So always had an interest, of course, to pivot towards finance. But, as a younger person who did excel in mathematics at a young age, I sort of thought accounting was the end all be all. Didn't really have that full awareness on finance until sort of went to undergrad and realized there's a whole new opportunity out here that seems like it could offer a nice, lucrative long-term risk and reward trajectory for a career. I sort of fell into asset management, I would say, through a little bit of dumb luck here, where my entire professional career has been in asset management, and it actually began with an introduction or a referral through my uncle, who worked in the mailroom and referred me to a job at his company, which happened to be one of the largest global asset managers, Invesco. So I started off my career in the client services department, effectively speaking to financial advisors on the phone. And from there, knowing early on, that money management was not the route that I wanted to go into, but knowing that was one of the probably more highly lucrative segments within asset management. The other segment that I wanted to consider moving towards was relationship management, knowing that was towards the front office, and this is probably a good long-term segment to take my skill set towards. So I knew before getting there, I wanted to find an opportunity within product. I networked quite extensively within Invesco and found an opportunity within the product team and held a variety of product-related roles, servicing retail and institutional clients in that role. And then sort of found and developed this interest in institutional. Thought there was this level of sophistication that made sense. It perfectly complemented the CFA knowledge that you learn from working through that curriculum, and thought this would be a good opportunity to try to segment towards, knowing that the institutional department is a very, I'd say, a small niche segment within the asset management distribution realm. It's very hard to break into there. I was fortunate enough to find an opportunity at one of Canada's largest independent asset managers, CI, within the institutional team, and had the unique opportunity, as you had mentioned, Niro, to build and grow out the institutional sales and marketing support team. It was that role where I was able to meet an affiliated manager of CI called Munro Partners. Which is where I am now, we are a Australian-based boutique asset manager. We specialize in global growth equities. I'm privileged and lucky enough to head up the North American distribution efforts and have the opportunity to continue growing the business from here in this part of the world. So Niro, thanks for the opportunity to be on the call today.
Well, thanks for taking the time, Akilan. Lakshmi, did you want to provide, your story?
Yeah, no, thank you again for inviting me here today. It's exciting to be part of this conversation and share stories, and also to hear everyone else on this panel and their stories and their journey. For me, much like Akilan, I was in school, I did well in math. I didn't really necessarily know what that meant, but I always used to say when I was younger, I want to work in business. And I never knew what that really meant, but I remember always saying, I want to work in business. I want to work in business. And so I went to school and I did a degree in economics and eventually did a master's in economics. I didn't land a job in business. I actually went into the government. And I guess this always I always wanted to work in business. So after 3 years, I decided that maybe if I did an MBA, that would help me achieve this goal. And it was only when I did my MBA that I really started to learn about different opportunities within what this concept of business is, whether it's consulting, whether it's within the healthcare sector. And I got interested in finance, and I really got interested in the concept of sales. At that time, equities was a very big component of what they were talking about in MBA. So I got very interested in sales and trading on that side. And so, got some, started to focus in on that side of the business and got some advice early on saying, maybe, you can't just jump onto calls with portfolio managers who are managing $500 million worth of money and give them investment advice. It'd be very good to do a job in research and then from there bounce into a sales role. And so that's what I did. I joined Merrill Lynch within their research group. And then after a few years, with so many people's help through introductions, started talking to heads of sales and eventually landed a role at Mackey Research. And in that role, I was covering European accounts, so mainly continental. And, again, through one of my Rotman colleagues who was working at Raymond James, they had an opportunity in the London office, and he pointed out that I was over at Mackey Research covering their European business and eventually landed a role with Raymond James in London, which took me abroad. While I was abroad, I guess you just get very interested in being abroad. And so I started to look at opportunities as well in Asia, eventually moved to Singapore where I worked for a Danish company called Saxo Capital Markets, which was great because I was doing still sales, but sort of diversified away from equities and did more multi-asset sales. And suddenly 7.5 years went by and it was time to move back to Canada because this is where I'm from. This is where my family is. This is where my parents are. And it's hard from Singapore to travel back and forth. And so when I came, I, reached out to a network of people who, was a bit worried because I'd been abroad. And so they were sort of dusty, but I met Akilan through that process. We met through that networking process, and people really helped me tie the dots, and I landed a role at RBC and now eventually at FTSE Russell where I'm doing index sales.
Great, thank you for the introduction. I mean, it really sounds like there's a lot of different paths that you guys have both taken. A lot of it, I think we'll touch up on this on later questions, but just want to point out here that I've already heard the theme that, knowing people and building relationships, then pointing you in the right direction, either from a mentorship perspective or even just by pointing out an opportunity is it's a very common theme between both of your stories. And as I mentioned from the intro, even from my own story with Lakshmi introducing myself to someone within National Bank. So it definitely does play a factor, and it definitely helps exactly, and it definitely helps especially coming from the Tamil community. It's not something we might be aware of at the foresight. It's mostly about getting the right grades, getting to the right industry, and merit kind of goes over everything else. But once you get into the real world, you come to realize that merit only gets you so far. Having that relationship definitely gets into that. But prior to getting into the theme of network, I do want to tackle the concept of, I guess, the term sales. I know the term itself has a negative connotation, within society as a whole. It does get minimized from the perspective that, it's a very simple job. How would each of you kind of describe the term sales, and why do you think it does have why it has a negative connotation within society?
I can start if that's of help. I think that sometimes, when it comes to sales, you think of someone who's just going to get there, get the contract, and then leave. And the beauty of finance is we're really trying to build trust and partnerships. That's a very big theme that we hear, because the concept is that when whoever you're selling, whether you're selling to asset managers, whether you're selling to pension funds, whether you're selling to banks, whoever might be the person that you're trying to develop these relationships with, it's an ongoing sales, and your reputation of the firm that you're representing is about that. And so I think that the focus should really be on that concept of, maybe it's, and there is a movement towards calling our roles business development, client coverage, for that reason, because the idea is for partnership, and you develop those partnerships through consistency. And that partnership can be through talking to people that you might, have conversations with, so you understand their needs. And when that needs align with some of the products that you're offering, that's when your opportunity as, if you will, a salesperson. But just because it doesn't align today does not mean that conversation should ever end, because people's needs are always evolving. And that is the beauty of finance. And it's something that Akilan said, he's like, institutional, there is a very high level conversation that happens. The reason why it's so high level is very in depth, I should say, not high level, but in depth, is because it's a changing need that's always there. And that's why you want to build those partnerships. I don't know if maybe you have something better to add.
Yeah, no, I mean, on my end, Lakshmi, I agree with everything you said there, actually. And in terms of that long-term partnership, I think that's really what it fundamentally is coming down to today for anybody who succeeds in this side of the business. They realize and they recognize that early on that it is a long-term strategic partnership. So maybe for Niro's original question, I'll start off with the second part of the question. And I would say I myself as well had a similar view towards sales in the beginning part of my career, and quite frankly, didn't give it enough respect that the role probably should actually command. And, being on this side of the table now, I've actually, learned this newfound appreciation to the term sales. And to me now, the word is more synonymous with humility, thick skin, and having to be on all the time, which is not as easy as people think on the surface. And sales, quite frankly, is a life skill set that every single one of us and every person on the call should be developing. I also believe in our industry in particular, this term has had this negative connotation in general because of what we may have seen in mainstream media. But sales also, as you mentioned, Lakshmi, it gives this feeling that the work is sort of transactional in nature, that you buy something and you're off to the next one kind of thing. And that also can give that feeling that this relationship is only intact for a specific outcome, which might come across sleazy or selfish. But to me, if I were to look at the real definition of sales, it's the ability for anybody to influence or persuade someone to do something. So it doesn't matter what we do for a living, we're all in sales in some capacity. So whether you're in a group project in university trying to pitch an idea and make sure that everyone buys into it, whether you're at work and you're talking to your manager at year end to get that pay raise or that promotion, whether you're negotiating with your spouse or partner on who's going to cut the lawn today, everything really comes down to sales. And as well, in our world, we just have to do that and convince prospects to buy our investment products at the end of the day. So we're all in sales, point blank. I do believe the relationship management side of the business, the people who get this early, that the ones that succeed, they're going to come across like the most credible, and they're able to develop and sustain that long-term relationship that you were mentioning. It's really a partnership over the long term, and that inherently will lead to superior sales results.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I completely think that, it's, that partnership is developed through consistency. And so you just have to constantly ensure that you have your product knowledge, that you're up to date on what's happening within the market, within your firm, so that you can talk knowledgeably about it and be a resource to your clients. And as long as you are considered a resource to your client, you can then develop that long-term relationship. They will think of you as someone who is helpful, and through that helpfulness, you will engage with them at some point. And so I like to think of not being in sales, but trying to think of myself as, how can I be helpful today? Would this information be helpful? Would me knowing this be helpful to someone? One person, 10 people, whatever it is, just try and be helpful. And that's my constant focus during the day, is how can I help?
Great, and I think the next question kind of really lines up with what you're saying in terms of what your job is. At the end of the day, to build that relationship, to maintain that relationship, to be helpful, to provide some value from your job facing the client, you do have to build some sort of common interest. You have to build rapport with them. Maybe it's earlier on within your career. Maybe it's something you're still working on now. What were some of your, I guess, hurdles at the very beginning? Was it basically coming from a different socioeconomic background? Was it coming from different cultures? I mean, personally, when I first started within the industry, it was a little, coming from a different socioeconomic background for most of the people within the industry. And obviously the biggest thing was the cultural difference. They weren't fleeing any civil wars from their side. So it's just coming from a completely different background and having to connect with these individuals at the very beginning was a little bit challenging from my end. What kind of challenges did you guys experience, and how did you overcome them, throughout your career? Because you're obviously both in prominent positions, so you guys obviously figured something out.
Yeah. Akilan, do you want to take it? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind taking a stab at that. It's a great question, Niro, and I think it's something that is great to address in this forum for the Tamil community, especially. I'd say the biggest cultural hurdle that I would have had is that, quite frankly, we're not given this blueprint on how to succeed, right? There's many studies, articles, anybody can go read up on it online. It pretty much that being born wealthy is actually a better indicator of adult success than your actual academic performance, which is almost counterintuitive to sort of how we're raised growing up. It's work hard, study hard, this is an elitist success. But then you actually come to the real world and you start realizing that there's some people out here who sort of had a much more, I'd say, like decisive understanding of where they were trying to get towards, right? So you start realizing that there's people with these established networks, they have clear cognizance on where they're going, there's common interests and so forth that are ingrained in effectively wealthier people's lives. So when you come to this professional world, you start realizing that maybe I have this lack of common interests or hobbies or clubs and associations that I'm not a part of. And as well, I don't have maybe the mutual contacts that all these people have, that some of these rich folks are probably born into. And that, quite frankly, does help these people navigate a lot more freely and decisively. This is where I'd say for us, this hurdle, you flip it and you got to just be more open-minded. You got to figure out how to be like relatable and also adaptable, which are keys for us all to succeed. If I actually think back to about 10 years ago when I started my career in asset management, I'd probably say the most pivotal decision I made was that I wanted to commit to the industry. And what I actually meant by commit was that I knew I was going to go all in. And when I mean all in, like put in the necessary time to get those credentials, make sure that I'm going to put the extra hours into work, say yes to all those social outings with colleagues and peers and clients, and also make the finance industry a bigger part of my day-to-day life. Like effectively, a lot of my friends and, the Tamils in Finance Network with all of us on the line here have all become pretty good friends where we can all interact and connect with each other at any time. So this is where I effectively say you got to turn that inherent disadvantage into your advantage. Like you'll see in this industry, people want to work with people that have a chip on their shoulder and have something to prove. So, if I use a real world example, being in the relationship side of the business, golf is a key recreational activity that can help you to further cultivate and nurture strong client relationships. This is where someone from my socioeconomic background did not grow up playing golf. And I started developing this over the last couple of years in my career. But I think the key is like you're willing to commit, right? So this is an important aspect of getting out of your comfort zone, really, right? And getting comfortable being uncomfortable effectively. There's an important saying, especially with new golfers like myself, if you can't golf well, golf fast, which pretty much means know your audience and just keep it moving, right? Make sure your clients can enjoy, right? So that's the key when you're out there. But with all that being said, I think as well, as much as we need to relate and adapt, we need to maintain our authenticity, our cultural authenticity. You have to be yourself and don't come across as a person trying too hard to fit in. I think that's very crucial to be successful in this part of the world. And this is where your cultural disadvantage, again, can become an advantage by virtue of you working harder, being very respectful and thoughtful, and always creating an energy where people want to be themselves around you. So make sure to play to your strengths and try to steer conversations and activities to where you feel the most natural.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I think for myself, sometimes when I first started, especially when I first started in sales, a lot of the portfolio managers would be, 20 years older than me. So it's not just sometimes a cultural gap, but even an age gap. And how do you come across that you want to sell, products that are, or an investment product that they might be investing in $10 million. And so it goes back to, okay, I need to prove that I am valuable. And how do I prove that I'm valuable? I know my product. How do I know and I be consistent? And I think it is important to show up as yourself. You can't change who you are or what you want to do, but you have to be confident in yourself and through knowledge breeds confidence, and through confidence breeds you bringing yourself to the table, and you can always steer the conversation to things that you're more comfortable talking about, or having great listening skills. People love to talk about themselves. So I may not have a cottage in Muskoka, but that doesn't mean I can't listen and hear about it and ask questions and wonder about it and really engage someone in that different way. Don't have to have everything in common. When I moved abroad, and like you're dealing with so many different cultures, dealing with clients who come from Switzerland or Hong Kong or wherever they may come from. It doesn't matter. You want to sort of figure out, you want to listen and you want to engage and be yourself. I think Akilan saying about how he always tries to be himself is a huge importance. And I think confidence helps you bring that to the table.
Yeah, no, that's very important. I mean, while being able to be, finding common ground, being genuine and, being yourself is super important. And I mean, I think to a certain extent, I think, and that's where some of the negative connotation that sales comes in, is that people perceive folks within the industry just to completely mold to who the clients are, as opposed to, expressing their own self-interest and, self-identity as well, which is obviously not the case. And I don't think you can really survive within the industry if you continue to do that. So I think being able, and like you both said, being able to be yourself, have your own interest and express your culture in different ways, that's a way to really establish relationship. And not everyone really likes being the yes person for every single thing, right? So pushing back on whatever decisions it may be, or maybe just learning more about your culture, can also go away in building relationship with clients as well. I know this is a topic we did discuss prior to the very beginning, in terms of creating a vital network, and in terms of building a strong network, in terms of career development or business opportunities. Do you guys both have, and I know you kind of touched upon it in your introduction, but can you expand on a little bit more on how important it is to progress within any industry, really, and in terms of just having the network and how it has helped you either from a personal growth perspective, career growth, or even being able to conduct some business through that as well?
I can try and touch on that first, if that works. When I first started, like I said, I got very good advice saying, a portfolio manager is not going to want to speak to you with you just out of school. You need to have an understanding of the markets for them to talk to you. And a good place to start would be in research. And I'm so glad I started there because it gave me the technical understanding, not just from an Excel point of view, but actually getting into the nitty-gritty of really analyzing, every side of a stock. And so when I did move into sales, yes, I am more reliant on an analyst, but I understand what they're saying and I can translate that into what I'm hearing in terms of when I'm talking to a portfolio manager. Because and that's such a huge thing. So I really appreciate that advice. And that mentor guided me not just through getting my research job, but then when I was really interested in getting in sales, it was like, okay, how do you make that happen? And it's nice enough to say, well, meet heads of sales, but what does that exactly mean? And what I learned is cold call heads of sales, ask them for meetings, and tell them you're interested and see if they'll meet with you. If someone literally did not tell me that, I would not have gone and actually done that. I would have been looking online for job postings, which never happens in that segment. So and then when I went for these interviews, they coached me on, okay, this is some of the things that might make people find you interesting is if you focus on this, because you have to now convince someone that you're not just a research person, but can move into a sales and, help them grow their business. And that is key when you've never had that experience. So what are some of the topics you should be talking about when you're in these meetings? So, every step of the way was help. And as a result, and even in my salary negotiation, having someone be able to tell you, this is what's like an open discussion can really help set you in terms of your future. So I think mentors are great, someone who you feel comfortable. And it's all throughout your life, like what you're looking for. I think honesty to me is the greatest thing. And so even when I was at RBC, I had a great mentor because he was honest and would say, and open my eyes to so many things just through his honesty, which sometimes you don't find people who are necessarily honest with you. And that is a great thing as well. So there's so many sides to where you start. And then also as you keep going through your career, you need that help and that push.
Yeah, I would echo Lakshmi there as well, Niro, in terms of how important the ability to network or how vital it's been towards my career or professional development. I think it's huge and probably one of the most important things that's effectively brought me to where I am today. The reason I am here today is because some of the relationships that I've cultivated over the years. So as mentioning earlier, the first job I got in asset management sort of by luck was a referral from my Sitapa who was in the mailroom at Invesco. My move internally towards product was through months of networking with the people in product and front office at Invesco and making sure I was trying to get in front of them with job shadows or whatever it is. So it was all a lot of sort of just making sure you're out there, you have that face time with people so they know that you exist. My move as well from Invesco to CI, I was recruited by the head of institutional who had a brief stint at Invesco and sort of knew me from there, but more importantly, thought I had a good reputation internally and took a shot on me to come join him over at CI Institutional to help build out the institutional sales support desk there. And then as well, fast forward to today, being here at Munro Partners, I was able to network with my CEO and my CIO back at my old role at CI, established credibility with them, had an open relationship with them, and quite frankly, had that rapport and expressed interest along the way that I'd be ready to, I threw my name in there and said, I'll be ready to help you guys build the Canadian footprint out one day. And fast forward 2.5 years later, they gave me an opportunity to do that. So networking, quite frankly, is extremely vital. I believe it's highly correlated to your level of success, especially in our world in relationship management, where all three of us here are probably compensated for building and maintaining a Rolodex of people that are effectively going to utilize our end solution. I know we're not in the same direct business, but that's effectively what we're doing for a living. So the more high quality relationships you can establish over the years, the more likely you are to do well in this part of the world. In terms of the mentorship aspect, I know Lakshmi was talking about that, and you've been fortunate to have had some good people along the way. I'd say the same as well on my end. Throughout my professional career, I've had about half a dozen mentors that have helped me along the journey, some of which have been organic, and it's through just networking, some as well through the Tamils in Finance Network, some of which I've met at the firms that I worked for, right? So I'd say the key about every single one of the relationships is that they've all been very important to me at certain stages of my journey, whether it was, discussing that pivotal career change, whether it was introductions to a potential client, whether it was discussing, compensation strategies, or whether it was input on designing a team that I had the fortunate opportunity of building out over at CI. I'd say like there's been so many of these like really, really important discussions and just brainstorming opportunities that I've had with some of my key mentors along the way. I'd also, I just would have to say here that out of all the mentors I've had, one would for sure certainly stand out for me the most, similar to you, Lakshmi, with your mentor as well. That would be for me, Roy Rutnavel, who is a fellow Tamil and as well as a part of the advisory board here at Tamils in Finance. He's an executive at my former firm, CI. Really, the relationship I cultivated with Roy over the past 5 years has been very pure and genuine. And I had this opportunity at CI where I literally just pumped into him in the elevator. I knew I would have a chance to introduce myself. And from there, we went out to having dinner and bonding over our very similar but different cultural upbringings and our overall passion for the investment management industry. So on my end, Niro, I've been fortunate to have had, a proven successful finance executive be a personal and professional mentor of mine, which has absolutely had a tremendous impact on my career development thus far.
That's great to hear. I mean, the common theme that I'm hearing is that, sorry, I'm not sure if you wanted to add on to something there, Lakshmi?
I did, if that's okay, but you can go first.
No, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to, there's just something that Akilan said really resonated with me, was because I did talk about mentorship, but there is the other side where it's just accumulating and talking to people, because I do find people within finance are willing to help, and you just have to go out and ask. And maybe it's not going to be 100%, but if you're out there and networking and talking to people, and if you eventually need something, you have that. And like I said, with, when I moved to London, it was through a classmate of mine from Rotman. I didn't actually know about the role or know that he was going to put my hat in. He just mentioned it, and all of a sudden I had an interview, and off I was going to London one day. But when I did move back to Toronto, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't keep my Canadian network, warm, if you will, when you're living abroad. And I started reaching out, and I was so happy to see how many people were linking to me. And just because one person might not be helpful or doesn't respond doesn't mean that 10 more people aren't going to help you. So you just have to, keep trying, keep asking. And when you do succeed, keep those things warm, though, because it's not just about, talking to people when you need something, but, being present at conferences and doing these talks and being part of people's lives, and also being responsive when other people ask you for favors. All of those things is part of creating a network.
Thank you. And then what I'm hearing here is that, at the end of the day, network is very important. And then Lakshmi, I think you really touched upon something very important at the very end there, where you referenced that, a network is not necessarily something that you gain from all the time. It's something where it's reciprocal. It's something that you help others out with as well. Maybe people are introducing themselves and meeting you over coffee chats or whatever it may be. So, and the other point I kind of quickly want to make here is that at the end of the day, the only reason a network can help you is if you already have merit to begin with. So, it's not as simple as saying that just talking to folks will get you a job or whatnot. at the end of the day, you still have to be, a friendly person. You still have to have good grades. You still have to be bright. So I think that goes without saying. But just so that people just don't. I think one of the things that I learned from the MBA was that there were folks who were just going out and networking with as many people as possible without as much substance. So there is a very fine line between building a strong network and building just any network. So I think you guys touched upon a lot of good examples on how to do it well. The next part I want to kind of, we are running out of time here, so I just want to move on to some other topics that we wanted to discuss here. This one is specifically for Lakshmi here, and it's within the finance industry itself. There have been more measures and changes in programs in terms of having more women within the finance industry as a whole. And there's women in capital markets. There's they're trying to increase hires across the industry itself. Since from what you've seen, have you seen change? What more can be done? What are your thoughts about making it more of an even playing field so that there are more women within this industry, specifically as in finance, but also from a client relationship perspective as well?
No, absolutely. I mean, there is so much data out there that talks about, the more diverse your company is, the more it grows and succeeds. And there's tons and tons of studies that have proven that over time. And, I think that it has been an interesting, especially in the last, over the years, over the course of my career, I've definitely seen more diversity, more women, playing a larger role. And I think that's important. There is something to be said where when you can look around and you can kind of see yourself in someone else, that it gives you that sense of, oh, they did that, maybe I could do that. It's very impactful, and I think it's important. And the only way that is going to happen is you have to hire in the beginning. And so what I love seeing, especially in the last 2-3 years, is that, there are these executives that their sole focus is on diversity and inclusion. And feeling like you can show up at work as yourself is a huge component of that. And I think maybe some might say, oh, but it's only at the bigger firms, but the bigger firms then hire, whether it's women, whether it's minorities, whatever segment of the universe you want to look at, then you give people experience. And then those people take their experience and then they get hired all across the board. And so I think I love what I'm seeing these days. I think there's so much more growth about that. And, the women in capital markets, they've been around for a long time. They do a lot. And what I think is so great about them is it's not just conferences and things like that, but they actively have, help people out of school get a job, or women who have taken time off to focus on their family and may have 5 years gap, help work with banks to hire those people and show that they have a great experience, bring them back in. And so, yeah, there's lots of work being done, and it's nice to see the growth, definitely.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts on that, and just maybe from your perspective as well, since you've also worked abroad, would you have anything to say to the audience? I mean, I think within growing up, within my generation, just in general in our generation, is that working abroad, it's not something that's common within the Tamil community. It's not necessarily, I wouldn't say it's necessarily frowned upon, but I feel like people kind of stay closer to home. Like myself, I did a rotation in Montreal and Calgary, but at the end of the day, I still wanted to come back to Toronto. There were no opportunities outside of Canada that I really explored. What's your experience at what you've gone through, working in London, working in Singapore? Do you have any message to the audience in terms of exploring that option, and what kind of got you interested in exploring?
So, like I said, I never had any desire to live abroad. I was very happy at home in Toronto, near my parents, and thought, Toronto is a great city. We all know that. So it's not like I had this huge desire. But what did happen is, I interviewed with Raymond James and then ended up getting the job. And that role was too big of an opportunity to say no. It was risky. It was, developing basically from scratch their continental European business after a financial crisis. But I knew in my heart, if I said no out of being scared, that I would always regret that, because on the other hand, that was a dream job of mine as well. And I will say, like, one of the advantages there's two advantages. You go abroad and you might not work in the main office. And what I loved about both my opportunities when I worked in Singapore and in London was the opportunities I had to wear so many hats. So yes, my hat as a salesperson trying to deliver growth, but then my hat as, okay, my responsibility is this entire continent. What do I think we should be doing in terms of marketing? If I want to host a conference, which, for example, once I did hold a conference in Zurich, it's up to me to choose the food, the hotel. There's no one else out there to help you with these things. And, if we have clients, like even corporate clients coming in from Canada, there's no one else to help develop those relationships. We don't have iBankers on the ground in London. So I would help to develop those relationships when they would be in London, for example. And so I felt like I got lots of opportunity. And even when I was in Singapore, one of my clients, they were this huge wealth manager in Bangkok. They wanted an economist from our bank to show up. And our economist was based in Denmark and he couldn't do the flight. And I really wanted to help my client out and not disappoint them. And so I delivered an economist presentation to all these wealth managers. And I'm so proud of that because it really, I said, I wanted to deliver. I did that presentation. It's not my role, but that's not the point. The point is to help and deliver to the client. And I did that and I learned so much in doing that. And if I was in the main office, there would be the economist there and he would have done the presentation and I would have never gotten that chance to do different things like that. So there's lots of opportunity, and not just that, but then also just integrating with different cultures, whether in Asia, in Europe, there's so much in terms of that side on like just your EQ grows exponentially living abroad.
And it must be interesting. We're only bordering, the US. So when you're in Europe or Asia, you're just bordering so many different countries. So it must be a lot easier to not just build relationships, but just, have different head offices in different countries and having that connection. It just feels more accessible.
Yeah.
Than I guess being in Canada.
In my office alone, like in London, there was a guy from France, a guy from Italy, a guy from Spain, from Canada, like all these. And then your clients are also from Switzerland, from France. So there's a lot of like cultural nuances that you have to learn. And when I lived in Asia too, I'm dealing with Aussies and Indians and Hong Kong. And so there's a lot of EQ to learn. And this goes back to what Akilan was saying, was just be flexible. And it doesn't matter that you don't know everything, or, you just go with the flow and you will pick up on this, and just listen and focus on what, listen to what your clients are saying, and you will pick up on how to move forward in any culture, as long as you're paying attention.
Yeah, and I just want to jump on that as well. So in terms of, I can't speak to the aspect of working abroad, but being here, a lot of the things you just mentioned resonated there, Lakshmi, in terms of working abroad and sort of being in that satellite office and effectively setting up the hotels for meetings and all that type of stuff. So now with myself going from global firm to large Canadian firm to a boutique satellite Australian firm here in Canada, I'm starting to see sort of the benefits of that, where you literally do get to do everything from top to bottom. It's been like an exponential learning curve at year 10 in the industry for me. And it's actually, if it's very rewarding, where you actually get to take on different types of stuff and just different scope to the role. So it really pushes your boundary and as far as you can learn. The second part, I think it ties back to what we've been saying as well. For anybody to succeed in these sides of the business, it sort of inherently forces you to just come out of your comfort zone. You're going to do things that, like you said, that presentation that you did on behalf of an economist, like, you're going to have to do these things because my team is in Australia. It's just how it's sort of going to work, right? So I definitely agree with that, and that's a great experience. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, at the end of the day, it sounds like you guys have, progressed in your career, from the very beginning to the end. They've taken different paths, but, advice to the, the audience here, would you start, in terms of marketability, do you start off with specific skill sets? Do you broaden out at the very beginning? How did you tackle that through your career? We kind of know the overall story in terms of the areas you guys covered in general, but in terms of advice you would give, would you start from being a very specific skill set and broadening out, or starting off broad and going a little specific, at least within the relationship management sector?
I'm happy to start.
Yes,
start,
on that. Please.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, no, it's a great question, Niro, and I think we all know the answer because we sort of all started on similar journeys in terms of that technical specialty. But I believe it's really important to develop that technical craft on the onset, or that specialty that you're going to focus on earlier on before you actually become a generalist, right? So for me, as mentioned throughout the conversation, it was embarking on that journey within the product side of the business and becoming that product specialist for the asset managers that I worked at. But this as well allowed me to understand, the portfolio management business in much more detail. It gives you confidence to speak to portfolio managers and have those engaging conversations to ultimately better support the end client. And most importantly, it helps you gain credibility when meeting new prospects or clients down the line. So I absolutely believe the technical skills gained allow you to have more substantive conversations with your clients. In terms of pursuing certifications and education, my view is that it should absolutely be complementary to where you are in your career. At the end of the day, there are millions of free resources that we can all gain access to online through continuing learning. So I think all of us need to be doing that point blank, period. That being said, along the professional journey, there are going to be some credentials that you're going to see that are just going to be necessary. So some of it may be required for you to get appropriate licensing for selling in your respective industry. Some might be complementary to the stage you're at in your career. For example, I decided to pursue my master's so that I could meet more like-minded finance professionals. So it was that networking aspect, but also to further show my dedication to the finance industry and sharpen my skill set. Another example in Toronto is the CFA. It's extremely saturated in Toronto. At least on a face value, it shows to an employer or a hiring manager that you're committed to the industry or committing to the industry. So finally, just on my end for myself, it's been extremely helpful and gratifying on my end to work with an executive sales coach from a company I work with called Natural Training for the past 18 months. And this is further helping me work on my confidence and fine tuning my craft and developing me professionally.
I mean, I think Akilan put that so well, especially when he talked about, being technical and giving you that credibility in the market. I think that is key, and that's something that I believe I obtained by starting in research and then moving into sales. And also, as I moved through different products, it really ensured that, even though I don't sell equity anymore now, that it's given me a basis to understand and move into other products. And I would add, I don't own my CFA. And what happened was I was writing it. And when I moved abroad, it became less important because it's not like Toronto. And then when I came back, I don't have a CFA. And that is an issue in this market. And I think, what Akilan said was very true. If you really are dedicated to this business and you're working in Toronto and you want to, show your commitment, the CFA is essential. And it gives you amazing, I have my level 1, it gives you amazing fundamental knowledge on a broad depth of every point of, the finance world. So it is something that's key. I would advise anyone to do it, although I do not have one myself.
Thank you for that. I mean, I totally agree with both of you. I mean, I didn't end up wanting to come into finance, but when I first started off, I did mechanical engineering. Having that technical background, it builds a backbone in terms of your thought process of how you formulate solutions and how you look at problems. I think it's super important, even within the finance industry, to have that technical background, have that being an expert matter in something prior to joining, being a generalist. At the end of the day, I think there's client relationship in any field. You look at within engineering, finance, healthcare, whatever it is. I think people just start off being, more specific, expert matter, and they eventually move on to more general roles where they can really talk about various topics, just knowing how everything kind of works, even at the very onset as an analyst, for example. We are nearing the very end here, so I wanted to stop here to see if there were any last advice that you want to give, anything you would want to kind of touch upon that we didn't really get a chance to talk about on this call.
I would just tell anyone and everyone, and don't set limits for yourself. People don't like to fail, and sometimes that makes people nervous to fail, or especially if other people know that they want something specific, they think, oh, then more people will know that I'm failed. Never set limits, just try and go for it. You're always better off. Even if you do, you will gain so much from that opportunity. And most people are not focused on failures anyway. That's a self thing. The fact that you said yes is what people will resonate more, and they'll think of you as someone who's willing to put themselves out there and do things, and more things will come your way, and you'll have that experience and know how to do it better next time. So just always say yes and never limit yourself.
Yeah, I as well on my end, I would echo that too from what Lakshmi said there. In terms of last parting words with everyone, Niro, for what I think is important for anybody who wants to develop or try to succeed in this part of the world, or the client-facing part of the industry, I think there's three things that I would probably want to give as a takeaway. It's be committed, be curious, and be likable. I can quickly expand on what I mean by these. Is in terms of commitment, I do believe you have to have the mindset that in the first several years of your career, you're going to outwork everyone without expecting immediate monetary results. Like time and time again, I've managed people want to make sure they're getting the top bonus, whatever it is. Like everyone's so compensation driven. I think the earlier part of your career, you're going to develop what I call as your career currency. And this is going to set you up well for your prime earning years down the line. So say yes to those extracurriculars, take lead on those internal voluntary projects that's important to your boss or the firm, and make sure that work and the industry is a bigger part of your overall livelihood. So in my opinion, this is not just a 9 to 5. So if you have a job 9 to 5, you're not working late hours, go pursue that complementary certification, go be at those industry events, be out networking and so forth. So that's the commitment aspect. In terms of curiosity, this has absolutely helped me, but it's just always keeping that open mind, and you've got to ask questions relentlessly and learn more. We talked about certifications and all that stuff that you could do with books, but it's not just about books and credentials. I mean, learn more by traveling, diversifying your hobbies, and making friends that are in different age groups or ethnic backgrounds. Especially in sales, when it comes to learning and being curious, it's also the willingness. Far too many people you see in this industry come across overly confident in their abilities, and they're not receptive to coaching or improving. So don't be like those people, and always be curious and have that feedback loop to learn. And the last thing is likability. I know that's easier being said than done. And some people may not just be naturally likable, but there's a few things that you can work on in terms of being that person that knows how to find commonalities with people, always compliment people, and as well be cooperative and not combative. It's important to always behave in a way that you're allowing others around you to feel very comfortable and natural, as opposed to guarded or protective. And as much as sales is, as we talked about, was about adapting or being relatable, it's very much about being your most natural and authentic form as possible. So people, quite frankly, can smell a phony. So it's always best to stay true to yourself and what you stand for. So with that, Niro, I just want to make a quick plug for Tamils in Finance, and you might do this as well, but I do want to say that this community and what we're trying to build here with this organization is to put together all these like-minded folks here. So I'm going to continue to, and I know you might be saying this too, but encourage everyone, like continue being part of this organization. I think there's a great place for all of us to go, and it's just about, all of us have met through this network, and it's just something that I'm really proud of, and I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of you, hopefully in a real world setting. So please stay in touch.
I think I made a good decision leaving 5 minutes for Akilan, because I knew he'll use all 5 minutes of it. But all joking aside, I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join this webinar. The relationship management sector within finance is an area that individuals within the Tamil community, as Akilan said, have not fully penetrated. I do hope this webinar has helped you a bit more in terms of getting a little bit more exposure within the industry itself, learning more about it through some of the experiences that Lakshmi and Akilan have shared with us today. A special thanks to the panelists for taking the time out of their busy schedules to sit down and provide their insights. It's greatly appreciated. For those who are not part of the distribution, Tamils in Finance will have many webinars in the future, so please try to stay in touch. Follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. Make sure you get yourself on the distribution list. There will be news out for future events and other publications. We do have regular publication that's sent out on a quarterly basis. You can do this by going to www.tamilsinfinance.com and adding yourself to the distribution. I want to thank everyone for joining our event today. Have yourself a great night. We'll see you guys at the next event. Thank you.